Hey guys, it's Cam here. Welcome back to the Build Room, and in this week's episode, I'm going to show you how to deal with a common problem on long-nose Celicas that affects drivability, handling, and safety, and that is worn out and flogged idler arms. So stick around and check it out. Okay, so this is the idler arm we're going to be working with today. It's actually off my other RA28, the Celica. If you know that car and you know the condition it's in, you will understand that yes, this thing is as busted and bunky as the rest of the car. And there are two main areas where they go out to lunch. The first is in the bush on the mounting arm, and you can see this one is pretty bad. So I can move the entire arm up and down on the mounting rod, and you can see that the rubber bushings at the top and bottom, just here and up there, have actually deflected because of the amount of times that that's happened. The second part that you get trouble with these in is the ball joint at the end, and this one, you can see I can move that ball joint in and out by about, I'd say at least nearly a full centimeter, and it just basically rattles around in the housing. So that is no bueno. That is worn to the point of being unsafe, and yeah, I don't want this in any car that I'm going to have to drive on the road. The problem with replacing these is that they are no longer made. There are no new parts and there are no aftermarket parts being built for the 23 or the 28 that I'm aware of, which leaves us with a couple of options. You can either try and find a new old stock of these, like something that's been sitting on someone's shelves for 10 or 20 years and has been forgotten about, and buy that. The problem with that is that it's going to be extremely hard to find, and if you do find it, the chances are it's going to be extremely expensive as well. There is also the question of, there are rubber parts on these in terms of the boot that goes around the tie rod, and obviously the rubber dust seals around the inner bushing on the arm. And they are going to, I guess, age out on the shelf as well. Anyway, a 50-year-old piece of rubber that's been in storage is probably going to perish a little bit quicker than one that's just been made, provided they're obviously made to the same quality. So yeah, new old stock ones of these are like unicorn poop and probably not worth the money you're going to have to pay. The second option that you have is to have this rebuilt professionally, and that involves sending it off to someone that specializes in this type of suspension componentry, having it rebuilt and sent back to you. Now there's a couple of problems there too. Firstly is finding someone nowadays that is willing to rebuild these things. In Australia, I haven't found that many, and what they're going to do there is they're going to replace the bushes and the seals around this arm here at the top on the mounting point, and they're also going to replace the ball joint. They basically cut the back off this here, see this raised section, and then they install a new ball joint from the back, and then they reseal it up. And then you have a remanufactured part, which should be to spec basically. Now the problems there are obviously trying to find someone and the time taken for shipping, and also the cost there as well. From what I've heard, it's about $300 or $400 to have that done, and that makes it a very expensive single component in your steering setup. And that brings us to our third option, which is the one I'm going to be showing you today, and that's how to build a hybrid idler using the specific RA23, RA28, long nose Celica, whatever you want to call it, using the specific components from that are needed to then tie into an RA40 arm that we can then use a specific bush to merge the two together, and we've got a working idler arm. The advantages are there. It's going to be way cheaper than both of those options. If you can find a local arm and bushing to where you are, it's a pretty quick thing to get done. It's certainly going to be a lot cheaper. An idler arm's probably in the $50 to $80 mark, and the bush is about $20. That's Australian, so for $100 you can have a hybrid idler ready to go. The downfalls to this process is obviously you've got to do it yourself, so you've got to trust in your own workmanship. And also, I have done this process before. This idler here, out of a really high quality 3.5 branded idler arm. The problem with this process that I encountered is a lot of the information that's out there is on various forums or Facebook posts and things like that. So you can never be 100% sure until you see it in person. And then secondly, even the process, once I'd read a bunch of posts and sort of detailed it out the way I thought it should go, didn't work with this arm. And what I discovered throughout this process was that not all arms are created equally, and specifically it can be really hard to find the right arm. In particular, I bought this and it was branded as a Wasp, not as a 3.5. I think the reason for that is 3.5 weren't making arms anymore, so companies like Wasp bought up 3.5 arms. I think they bought up road safe arms and like a bunch of different suppliers that had old stock sitting on the shelves. They reboxed them and they sold them as their own, which means 2 Wasp branded arms could be slightly different. And that's what I was encountering. So we'll talk about some of those problems as we go through this build, but basically it didn't really work on this. I kind of had to make it up as I went along. I will be trying to give you as much information as I can now so that you can avoid the pain that I went through. There is a full video on this if you want to watch it to get that background. I'll link to it up here. But for now, let's take a look at the workbench and see what we've got to work with today. All right, so we've got our original RA23 RA28 arm, the hybrid idler that I built last time, and then we have 2 other parts. We've got an RA40 idler arm, and this is a Mevo Tech unit. This is a brand new unit. The main difference between this arm and the flat nose first gens is the spacing on the mounting points. And even if you were to re-drill this bracket, you really got to be careful because you need the arms moving on the same plane. So if you move that one way or another, you're going to cause some problems. So that mounting bracket needs to be changed. And then also on that mounting bracket, the diameter of the bolts that run through them is different as well, which means we need to make sure we get the right bushing to fit. Which leads us to the other piece that we need for today, and that is a Super Pro idler arm bush. And this is for a Toyota Hilux 2-wheel drive model. It's an SPF 1287K, and it just comes with a 2-part cotton reel bush and some installation grease. And it's always important to start with a fully lubed bush. So those are the 2 parts. Let's start on the disassembly of the original part now. We'll make sure this is all in good shape because if there is a problem with the mounting bracket and the bolt, obviously we don't want to use it, but we'll get it apart, have a look. We'll deconstruct this bit so you can see the internal construction as well. And then we'll move on to what we need to do to put this together with the new arm. Before I pull this apart, let's have another quick look at how bad this thing is. We've got the rod end. Oh yeah, plenty of movement in that bad boy. And then the mount end. No problem, right? Anyway, we'll get this top nut off. Ooh, that's pretty tight. Gonna have to bring in the big guns. Now, this washer actually clamps or kind of locates onto a ring. I'll show you in a second, but it won't be easy to get off. So just give it a couple of love taps. Should come off. All right, so 2 things. If we look in here, you can see that the bush that was in here is garbage. That is completely gone. If I take that off, you can see the teeth here that locate the washer. So the washer drops all the way down and it actually grips onto those so it doesn't rotate. I think that's basically the equivalent of a locking nut or nylock nut for these, and it would also stop it from abrading the surface of the seals and stuff on the other side. So yeah, don't just replace that with a dodgy one from Bunnings. And the thing that we have to be careful of here is you want to check the shaft just to make sure there's no heavy pitting or rust or anything like that. It's not the worst idea just to give it a spray with some WD-40 and clean it up with a bit of steel wool just to make sure all the mating surfaces are as clean as they can be. All right, that looks good enough. It's nice and straight. There doesn't seem to be any really bad damage. There's a little bit of staining and things like that, but you know, you get that on the big jobs. So yeah, I'm happy to use that. Also just gonna clean up the back of this washer as well. Same deal, bit of steel wool. Out the washer. And then we can just put this to the side for now. And in terms of the old arm, don't throw this out because sooner or later they're going to stop making RA40 arms, and then these things are going to be the ones you send away to get rebuilt rather than sending an RA40 way apart. So put this on a shelf somewhere and hang on to it. Then we put the new arm in, whip the nut off that one. Right, and then if we have a look at this one, there is the rubber seal that you can see on the edge, and it covers up the cotton reel bush that's inside it. So now we just pull this off. All right. And then if we look at this bracket, the Diameter is about 16 mil here. And the original long nose first gen one is closer to 18, right? So that is the difference between the two. 2 mil difference on the shaft size. That's why we have to change these bushes. And to do that, I'm gonna throw the rubber jaws in so we don't damage the arm. And the bushes are split in the middle. And if you use something, I prefer to use something that's not particularly sharp, and just slide it in and catch the edge. And you should be able to knock them out the bottom. There goes one, that's easy. So yeah, that came out without a struggle. You can see the rubber seal here is still in place. Now we just need to get this one out. And there we go. All right, so now I've got the gloves off and I can lube up some bush. Like I said before, it comes with its own little sachet of installation grease. And you should use it liberally. The inside of this bush is knurled so that it'll retain a little bit of that lube. Once you go jamming the shaft down the middle of the bush. But yeah, on this one, I prefer to go over lubed than under lubed because I don't want squeaks or premature wear. And that's probably about where we need it to be. Let's slot that one in. Lube the next one. Once you're happy with that one, it can go in as well. Now I'm also going to lube up the bracket, and I'm going to lube all the way from the tip of the shaft right down to and including the base. And then we're just going to slide the arm over the top. And I find if we just wiggle it as we go down, it's more likely to seat without pushing these bushes out. There's one. You just got to try to keep that in the top because it's going to want to pop out as we put pressure on it. That's 90% of the way in. What I'm going to do is lube up the washer, and then we'll use that to squash it down. All right, so far so good. And what we're gonna get to is a point where it's gonna start to engage with those teeth. I think that's pretty good. We'll pop the nut off and just make sure that it did seat. All right, yep, that's nice and flat there now. So yeah, it's in where it should be and it's about level with the height of the rubber seal. So all good there. But if you saw, it did compress and then re-expand when I took the bolt off. And I don't know if you can see in there, but see how close those teeth are to the top of the seal. And so what we need to do here is we can still let the nut compress the washer, but we want to hold the washer still so that it doesn't end up rotating and chewing out those teeth. All right, so it's engaged with the teeth. Now we just need to bottom it out. And that's it. And we've still got good movement in the arm. So that'll do for that. Now there is probably a torque setting for this, but I can't find it listed anywhere because I think generally you replace these as a unit, so no one ever needs to list that. If you know what the torque setting should be, please let me know. But yeah, we're all back together now. It just needs one more thing. A paint job. I have found that these surfaces don't protect very well. They do still tend to rust through. So yeah, I'm gonna give the whole thing a paint job. Not too worried about the finish. You can probably do this while it's apart. It'll probably be a lot easier because you won't have to worry about these seals here, but you still have to worry about the tie rod end. And I find that every time I do this apart and then reassemble it, I always manage to chip it through reassembly. So let's get some paint on this now and have a look at the finished product. All right, so there we have it, our finished hybrid idler. And all I did to clean it up was wire brush the old bracket, gave it some wax and grease remover to get everything off it, carefully masked up the tie rod end and seals, some primer, and then a couple of colors, and then some clear, and that is what we're left with. So for the people really paying attention, this Shogun gray is actually the gray that matches the brake lines on the diff for Violet Crumbles. So this one's gonna end up in VC. And yeah, I'm super happy with the way it came out. It looks good. There's really no planing at all. We've got smooth movement in the bracket, so really couldn't ask for much more than that. Now, I did say that I would make sure that I gave you all of the part numbers, but the part numbers are probably not enough. So let's talk through this. It's probably easiest just to start with the bushing. So the bushing, as I said before, it's a Super Pro SPF 1287K. Let that focus in there. It is a purple one, but it doesn't matter because you never see it. It matches Violet Crumble, so, you know, it's okay on the inside. You can just get those off eBay. They're not hard to find at all. And then in terms of the idler, the one that I have is a Mevotech, as I mentioned before, and the serial number for this one is MS86903. So I'm just gonna put that up there. And this one I actually bought from Rock Auto. They have heaps of parts for these old cars, and to be fair to them, they're actually pretty good for shipping to Australia. I mean, shipping from US to Australia is always expensive, but these guys seem to not be actively gouging you on shipping, so that's a pleasant change. I will say though, this was out of stock when I first looked, and what I did was put an alert in to get an update when they were in stock, and then ordered it when they were. They are out of stock again. I just checked a couple of minutes ago on the computer, so Rock Auto, no stock of these, but you can get alerts, and they do have other models of this as well. So if you can't get this exact model, what should you do? You've obviously got to order some other brand. I've heard that the ProTech branded ones will also work with this setup, but I think the key is if you look for something that has the very large rubber seals top and bottom of the idler arm, because with those seals there, you can be sure that they need enough space for those things to seat on, which means you're shrinking the actual area that you can have a bush slide through. So you can be pretty sure there that you're gonna get the cotton reel type bush insert to fit into it. The hybrid idler that I built, I think the internal diameter here was like 30 millimeters, and that's because it had those more control arm type bushes. So I'll dig up a shot of the stock arm when I was putting that together for the previous episode, and you can see that it doesn't have those rubber seals on it. So I think if you're looking to get one and you can't find a brand, but you can find a picture, and Rock Auto, for instance, are quite good at putting photos of their actual stocked items into their inventory, then I would say buy based on that. That's probably your best bet. So yeah, second shot at a hybrid idler. I don't think this one is horrible by any stretch of the imagination, but I definitely prefer this one here. So that brings us to what are we doing next week? And we're gonna change it up next week a little bit. The R34 is finally coming into the garage. There is a common problem with the R34s that is stopping me from using it as a daily driver at the moment. So we're gonna tackle that one and get it squared away so that I can sell my other temporary car that I've now had for 6 months that I bought just to get me through while I was waiting on the Skyline, and then I never actually swapped them out. So yeah, I'm paying a lot of rego. I don't want to do that, so we're getting stuck into the R34. So in between now and then, if you haven't been watching the series, I'm going to link to the full Violet Crumble series up here, and the Do For Now series, or the Top Gun 28 series, are down below. Other than that, I just want to say thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time on The Build Room. Bye for now.